The pandemic restricted regular mobility, which resulted in a higher number of people reporting back and neck pain. Lower back pain has suddenly turned into an epidemic, with statistics showing that 80% of people suffer from the problem once in their life without even realizing it. Now, 60% of Indians have suffered from low back pain at some time during their lifespan, yet more than 50% of people do not receive the rehabilitation services they require. Hello, I'm Smita Kumar, and you're watching MediCircle. So today on our healthcare startup series, we have one company with us, and we will be talking about this startup and what is it is doing, especially in the healthcare domain, and how it is touching the lives and making healthcare accessible and affordable to a greater population. So we have Brijraj Bhuptani with us, and he is the co-founder of Spry Movement app. He was previously the co-founder and the CEO of Bird's Eye System Private Limited, which was acquired by Ola. He has worked as a delivery manager with Sears India and was the chief technology officer for Ola. His aim with Spry Movement is to make movement health accessible and affordable for the 2 billion population who are suffering from it. Hi, Brijraj.
Thank
Welcome to MediCircle.
Hi, Smita. Thanks for the introduction, and excited to be talking to you and your audiences as well.
So I'm also very, very glad to have you, because see, back and lower back pain is it's like a very common phenomena. Definitely, the way that we sit and the postures are also not correct. So let me know about your Spry Movement app, how you started, how you co-founded this, and what are the prime offerings.
Yeah, I think thanks for that. And as you mentioned, I'm a second-time founder, right? And I already have built one company, scaled it to a certain extent, and then obviously I was part of Ola at the CXO level, where I've seen what scale means and implemented that, right? So this time when I was solving for a problem, looking for the next adventure, next problem as well, I was looking for a big impact opportunity. And I've realized that you can build big institutions faster than others if the tailwinds are in your favor. If people are growing, like the industry is growing. And as you rightly pointed out, right, 2 out of 3 people have back pain or knee pain, right? 1 out of 3 people need musculoskeletal rehabilitation and they don't have access to care. So this is actually the problem I wanted to solve. But how do I get here was very interesting. So there are 2 parts of how it happens, right? I've been a sportsman all my life, right? I've played cricket, football for my school, districts, etc. And even when I was in the US, I used to represent my city, played with a lot of international cricketers, Ranji cricketers when I was playing in the leagues in the US. And when you play for the leagues, obviously you have your fair share of niggles, injuries, etc. No one goes without it. But for me, care was very easily accessible. My sister is one of the best sports physicians in the country. And I would just call her, okay, Fish, I have this problem. She would ask me to do a few assessments. I would do it on the phone, on WhatsApp call or Skype call at that time. And she would ask me to ice it, do some few ailments and a couple of exercises. And next week I would be ready for my game. Right. So I'd always had this that it's very easily accessible to me. So I didn't think of it as a problem. Right. But when the pandemic happened, right, I saw 2 parts of the equation. I saw the same sister struggling a lot, transitioning a practice from offline to online, right? Where she had to get on a Zoom call with the patients, explain to them what exercises mean, monitor the exercises, send prescription or WhatsApp. Now these things come automatically are obvious to me because I was always a techie. But people were struck. Her patients were struggling. She was struggling to get her patients to adapt to that, right? And then that's when I thought that why isn't this streamlined? Like I was a CTO at Ola at that time. We have a driver, we have a customer, we have so many cars, and all of that seamlessly integrates, right? You don't realize, you click a button on the app and the driver comes to you. So why couldn't that be the case in physical therapy, right? Why is it so broken along the way? And that's when I realized there were like so many disparate systems not talking to each other. And if there can never be a seamless process which is established between them, which makes delivery of care very, very difficult, especially, and it was highlighted more when the pandemic happened, right? As happened. And on the other side, I saw my mother who was due for a knee replacement. Right. So she was, but we could not get her treated because obviously hospitals were shut down. They were only looking at emergency cases. We could not get her to even a therapist to come at home because we were in lockdown. So she was struggling, right? And there was no way she could have gotten care. Why couldn't there be a therapist on the other side who could guide her exercises? Or why does it have to be a therapist on the other side? Why couldn't the bot actually guide her on what exercises? Because knee pain is a standard pain, right? So that's why I saw 2 parts of the action: a doctor struggling, transitioning her practice from offline to online, and a patient not able to avail care. Now, if I can stitch all of this together and make asynchronous care also accessible, right? And emotional, then actually you are building a platform which not only improves the care delivery, but also make it affordable, accessible, right? And as I said, the tailwinds are correct. The number of people who are having issues are only going to increase. Another important aspect is if you look at all the developed world, UK, US, UK, Japan, the aging population is increasing, right? By 2040, we'll have more people about the age of 60 than the younger people, right? So as you obviously age, your muscle mass, you lose muscle mass, your body aches increase, and you need strength and conditioning more importantly at that point of time. So there'll be more and more demand for this, and this is always going to be a supply constrained market. There are only 2.5 million therapists in the world. We're adding 7-8% every year. So the number of people needing therapy will be far more than the number of therapists we're adding to the platform, right? And this distribution of therapists is obviously skewed towards the bigger towns, bigger cities, because that's where the business is, right? The people in smaller cities will always struggle. So the idea was, how do you make it accessible, affordable to everyone? Take a lot of the care online, make it, even if I'm living in a remote suburb, I should be able to access care. So that's what was the highlight of actually wanting to start. And if you think of it, if you look at my background, my entrepreneurial journey, somehow I've always believed in the idea of helping people move. Right, my previous startup was helping people move from A to B using public transport, using cabs, make it easy along the way. Because I think movement is the essence of life. All of us realized during the pandemic that just being stuck at home is not most ideal scenario. Right, we were earning money. We were all, some of us were fortunate to be earning money while working at home. But as soon as the lockdowns opened up, we were eager to get out. Right, we were eager to go the weekend, no matter to Maldives or some weekend destination or whatever it was. Right. So no one likes to be stuck at home. Movement is freedom, and freedom is what we live for, right? We earn money for freedom. We work hard for freedom, right? So if I'm not able to move, then I don't think there is any point in doing anything else in life. So I think if the idea is to give people freedom, and that's, I think, the bigger purpose of life as well.
So, but a technical thing to movement, what you learn from Ola, I mean, the practices which you learn from Ola would be definitely there in your new startup here. But like, what are the important USPs of Spry over other? There are so many other healthcare providers also, like iHeal, Health Tech. So, what are the important unique value propositions?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think, and that's where, so if I have to introduce Spry in one word, right? What else? One sentence, for example, I would say Spry is a purpose-built platform for physical rehabilitation. Right? Now, the word purpose-built is very, very important. Physical rehabilitation is one of the segments of healthcare, but it's a very different segment of healthcare, if you see, right? I'll tell you a few examples. A lot of physical therapists get their patients, 70% of the patients come from referrals, and 30% of the patients come from direct access. Now, there are no pipelines which have been built to actually handle that. So even in the US, you wouldn't believe, orthopedic, when he's sending a patient to a physiotherapist, he's sending it via fax, right? Yeah, you'll be surprised at that, right? Or in India, you'll see a paper note which is coming to it. So there's no documentation, no history, there's no accountability, etc. On the other hand, more and more people, younger people, have started realizing the benefits of therapy, and they're starting to search online. So physical therapist near me is one of the most high volume keywords. It's higher than oncologist near me, gynec near me, ophthalmologist near me. But again, there are no pipelines for physical therapists to convert their traffic to come to them, right? So handling them. So that's one. Second part is the treatments are very, very personalized. It's not like a general physician where you give a dolo or a crocin or whatever it is, right? It always depends on what your past context is, and a big factor of what your goals are. For example, if you had an accident or if you had obesity, right? The plan of care will be different, and also depends on your goal. You want to be a weekend warrior, you want to have an active lifestyle, you want to be a cyclist, you want to be a swimmer. There's no one plan of care for everyone, right? So that's why you have to manage a different plan of care, which is very, very different, right? So that's the second. And the third and the most important part is the rehabilitation is very behavioral and happens outside the home, outside the clinic. It's like diabetes.
Yes.
If you look at dental, if you look at any surgical ones, the patient involvement is much higher. So the platform when you build, it has to be a patient-centric view, right? So this is the nuances of physical therapy. And no, there's no platform in the world which has been developed keeping these nuances in mind. So what a physical therapist done, they have taken some existing platform which has been developed for maybe a dental or an ophthal or whatever it is, and adapted to their workflows. So there are like 2.5 million physical therapists. 85% of them end up using some kind of horizontal software, Excel sheets. So that is exactly what is happening with my sister. She's using multiple Excel sheets to manage, right? So bringing all of this together, designing work, that's the USP number one. Designing workflows which are physical therapy specific. So in our application, the doctor never needs to type. Just click, click, click. We made entire algorithm for flowchart workflows which are based on physical therapy. If you have shoulder injury, these are next set of questions. If you have leg injury, these are a set of questions, right? And then the third part is we monitor the user when the user is doing it at home. So the user is not isolated, not lonely. 90% of the rehab happens there, right? We get feedback immediately. And then the doctor also knows whether the user is progressing or not. So it's a continuous connection on between the user. So we obviously stitch all of this, but then we are solving problems which are physical therapy specific at each step. And that is the USP of Spry.
But a little small question here, Brijraj, that as this is too much personalized, because physiotherapy is definitely concerned about the patient's present status, past status, and then it is a personalized treatment plan which is given to the patient. So isn't it too difficult to scale up as a startup, because it's really going to be very, very much.
We are not in the It's a very good point. And we are not in the business of designing personal plan of care, right? The plan of care is still designed by the doctor. We give the doctor the tools to design, make it easy for them to design this plan of care, and then make it easy for the patients to adhere to this plan of care. And then we play the role of the intermediary who make sure that both are aligned, right? So the plan, we have an actual path, we have a desired path of how the patient should progress and a desired path. We are monitoring the patient. We are not telling the patient what exercise he or she should be doing. The doctor has prescribed that based on the condition of the patient. Now we understand that treatment and then we just observe that the patient is doing that or not using computer vision. The patient doesn't need to enter anything, right? So we act as a bridge or an interpreter between the two. And that's one of the primary reasons we decided not to become a digital clinic. What you said is a very, very valid point. There are so many digital clinics out there. And when I looked at their progress, they've been confined to conservative care. They can treat basic neck problem. They can treat a basic back problem, right? You need the context of the doctor. You need the education of the doctor, the experience of the doctor, and the context of the injury to actually design a very good comprehensive plan of care so that everything doesn't become cookie cutter. So what we are saying is, and that is exactly our thesis. The doctor should be focused on the plan of care and adaptations which are needed if things don't go on the track. Now, if the doctor is spending too much time on administrative issues, if I got my money from insurance, if the patient is coming or not coming, if the patient adhering or not, as they have to send the exercises, then he or she doesn't have time to actually create the best plan of care. So our thesis is exactly that we are giving you everything. We'll automate everything else for you. You just focus on the plan of care. Like when a user comes to when a patient comes to the clinic for the first time, you're spending 45 minutes just taking data about his medical history, his background history, which you can do offline or you can do from third-party sources, right? Why does a doctor who's at 1,000 rupees an hour or 2,000 rupees an hour spending time on actually doing that? It's a waste of money for both sides, right? It doesn't need to be manual in that sense. But if you make at the same time, if you make a very cumbersome form, then the patient is not going to fill out. Why should I fill out, right? That's why you make very purpose built is the right word for that. That's why you build purpose built form. If you have shoulder injury, they only enter question specific to shoulder. If you have an injury, only enter specific to shoulder, right? So that's where the nuance of Spry comes in, right? There are a lot of small things. That's when I tell my team that 1+1 will equal to 11 in Spry. When you do these small things, right, that's when it becomes a very major solution, right?
But many a times patients actually want to narrate the entire story, and if they have not done that, they feel that doctor wouldn't be able to give the best plan of treatment for them. That's in Indian scenarios.
Agree to that, right? So think about it this way. A narration of an incident is multiple things: your date, your age of birth, your education, your background. Do you want to narrate that, or you want to narrate how the incident is impacting you? Like you want to focus on the second part, but the first one is also billable, right? You are paying the doctor for that because essentially you're paying for the doctor's time, right? And the doctor is reading that. If the doctor has any questions, obviously they will be engaging with you. I'm not saying the doctor robots who just given it, because we are not saying that the in-person interaction goes away. We're just saying that the in-person interaction, which was earlier 60 minutes, can come down to 15 minutes, but more focus on the plan of care rather than anything else. Right? If you've entered, okay, you feel that your shoulder is coming out of your socket, and when you lift your hand, so the doctor will definitely ask you to do a bunch of exercises during which you will narrate the incidents. It's not taking away the patient. As I said, empathy is the most important, one of the most important part of the treatment. So it's not, the idea is not to take away empathy. The idea is to actually give empathy which is specific to the problem rather than all the generic thing that we do, right?
That's a beautiful thing to do. So like how many clients you have benefited that has been benefited from your offering so far?
So we have, as I said, we have two parts of the portal. The patient part is in beta mode, so we're not released it to PAP, but the doctor side is actually being used by close to 150 clinics across the world. Right? Majority of them are obviously in India. 130 of them are in India, and then we have another few. We've started the international expansion only towards the last quarter of last year because we had to get the product ready for international standards, insurance integrations, all of that. So we started with India first, which is relatively easier. And the easiness is not on the medical side, the easiest is on the payment side, right? Because we don't, OPD is over the cash. It's basically cash reimbursements rather than going to insurance company. So we have to do the insurance integration with the insurance company, etc. That took us a little longer. So now we are, but this year the focus is more on, so 150 clinics is what you can say have benefited from this, where they're already seeing that more patients are coming into the system. So there is two places where we directly impacted, three places we have directly impacted their business. One is the number of people booking appointments, the number of people showing up, because a lot of digitization happened, a lot of SOPs have opened, right? Because if a patient does not show up, there's no money, there's no loss, right, for the patient, but there's definitely loss for the doctor. Second is the doctor burnout. The doctor was actually going through very cumbersome form to write out. Now the doctor is taking 30 to 40% of the overall time. Like earlier they were taking 20 minutes, now they take 6 to 7 minutes to actually fill out the entire notes and actually. And the third is the cash flows have improved because we've integrated with the insurance companies, we've automated the entire process of getting, right? So three benefits you already bringing. During the course of the year, we'll do a lot more work on the patient side, where patients can remotely access treatment at home, therapy at home. So the metric that we'll be targeting in that case will be adherences. How many people are now completing the plan of care? So one statistic that is there is that only 20 to 30% people actually complete the plan of care. Okay. The normal human tendency is that as soon as I'm relieved of pain, yes, I get out of the treatment. But really getting yourself relieved of pain is not the right thing. You have to make sure that the injury does not relapse again. You condition that part of the body. You provide the necessary strength and exercise to strengthen conditioning. But people don't go through that. People don't have the patience for that, right? So as soon as I get done with my pain, I'm done with it, right? So that's the mentality. But when you have this, we'll increase the adherences so that people even reduce the chances of re-injuring themselves.
Yes. And your startup has received, $3 billion as seed funds from Together Funds. So how have the funds been utilized so far?
So we've raised $3 million from Together.fund and a variety of angels from India and the US. As in an early stage startup, I think majority of the fund is being used in product development. Right. But coming from product background, we have gotten a product to very mature state and very expedited manner. And now most of those funds will be utilized for the go-to-market strategy, specifically in the US, right? So we're setting up a go-to-market team in India. I'll be in the US for the next couple of months, starting from May first week. We're building a small team in the US as well. And then we're building a lot of marketing collateral. So our product is at a stage where it's being well received by people we are demoing it to and the physical therapist community in India, in UK, in the US. And now I think we'll be spending more and more of our money in the go-to-market activities over the next few quarters.
And what were your finances? I mean, your figures, revenues in FY 2022, and what you're planning to close at this end year of FY 2023?
It's very early to discuss revenue. I think 150 clinics is what we've onboarded, right? And we typically make around anywhere from, depending on the geography. So in the US, we'd make around $20,000 to $25,000 per clinic per year is what we would do, right? In India, we would make around 50 to 60,000 rupees per clinic per year is what we are coming at. And it's very early days. So we started adding clinics towards August, September. The first 3 months were a trial because it was a very early stage product. So now we started realizing revenue. So it's early days to discuss revenue, but by the end of the year, I should bet number. We're targeting a few $1 million ARR by the end of this year, definitely. So yeah, that's where we are today.
So expanding in the US is one future expansion plan of Spry movement. What are the other goals and future expansion plans?
So I think we're not focused on expansion at this point. So I think US is a very, very big market. It's a $40 billion market growing at a 6% CAGR, just a physical rehabilitation industry. And our share within that is a good 8 to 10%, right? So we are a vertical size platform. So the importance for us is go deeper, not wider at this point of time, right? We are going deeper. So how can we have a bigger portion of the value chain, right? Beyond, so we are in a working clinic, but beyond clinic, I want to also work with home health. I want to work with health systems. I want to work with hospitals in the physical therapy department. So we are not looking to expand in geography. Let's get the US right. US is the most important and biggest market. Will be constitute eventually in the long term. If I see 40 to 50% of our revenue. Also, culturally, US makes sense. There are two reasons, right? One is OPD is reimbursed. OPD is reimbursed. That means my internal resistance of going to a physical therapist and spending money will be very low. Employers compensate for that. Although insurance also compensates for that. There is workman compensation, which are very specific to the US, right? And the second part is in US people don't like dependence, right? People also like to be independent. If I have own pain and if I'm going to depend, I would not appreciate that. So I would rather get treatment than do something else. So I think it's the right market for us to actually do that. And once we do that, then the rest of the world becomes easy. As I said, no one is catering to the. So I'm not worried about competition at this point because there's no one in the world who's working on physical therapy. I rather focus on the depth of the market, actually creating this. We want to transform the way physical therapy happens, right? And improve those metrics during the course of the year, and then think. But so instead of, as I said, second time founder has a lot of learning, right? So instead of just thinking about expansion, I'll go deeper in creating impact, and then the expansion will happen automatically.
Okay. And any piece of advice for the budding entrepreneurs who are watching this video?
Yeah, there are quite a few of them. I think I can share learnings from my first one that have to be focused on business model, right? How the company makes money, how will the revenue monetization happen? It can happen later on. I'm not saying the revenue monetization happen, but there has to be a sense of one thing I missed in my previous company, and I think understanding value chain, and not just get not just be in love with numbers, big numbers, right? So I'll tell you what I mean by that. So I was in the business of public transport where we enable ticketing for millions and millions of users every day, right? 100 million transactions are happening on it. But the problem with that was that each transaction only 10 rupees and I was making 1%, 2% of that. So in the value chain, was a very small number. So understand value chain, because if money is flowing through a system, you will make money. But you have to understand where you want to place yourself, right? Understand value chain. And the third is, which again, I made a mistake, and solve the difficult problems first. Don't delay them. For example, right now, as you said, why would I even want to go to the US? Why can't I just dominate India, Southeast Asia, Middle East, where Indian companies have traditionally do well, and then
yes, that was I was about to ask, like why you are opting for the US market?
Yeah, so I was a part of Ola when we launched in London, right? And so obviously Uber was in multiple London cities before us, so we were always playing catch up to them. But Didi was always playing catch up to us also, they're more money. Right? So there is definitely a big advantage on being early to the market. And what we realized when we launched in London was that we didn't have to do something very different. We had to do the right things, right? You just have to do the right things for the business. It's not that they were a better product or we just get on over their Uber and they're building a better product. No, we had as good a product. Our NPSs were as good. Our driver reception was good. You have to do the right thing for the business, right? And if you do, and you have to be ready to do it on day one. Once you do that well in India, then it just makes it easy to do it in India as well, right? So I remember that our within 15 days of a launch, 20 days of a launch, we were one of the top cities for Ola, right? In terms of GM we were adding. So it just makes a big difference. So solve the earlier problems. I think in the early days, the pressure from investors is also lower expectation. You're more agile as a company. You might be able to iterate fast. So, and then you want to do entrepreneurship, you want to do business so that life becomes relatively easy as you go forward, right? So why do you want to delay the difficult problem? Solving on day one.
True, very true. So definitely you have shared some very cool piece of advice, especially some mistakes that we generally make in our entrepreneurial journey. But there are very few entrepreneurs who share them. But this is like an eye opener for a lot of other entrepreneurs who might be making those same kind of mistakes. So thank you so much, Brijraj, for joining us today on our healthcare startup series, and all the best with your Spry moment. And definitely it must do good in US and in the Indian markets as well. Thank you so much for joining once again.
Thanks, Mika. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you.